record to this computer. So, okay, thank you very much again for joining. This is the Data Science Incubator about creating reproducible examples. There is at least two ways that I know of in which we can create reproducible examples, and one is with the reprex package. The reprex package is designed specifically for this purpose, and it has very good documentation about how to use it. So the very first link here, so this whole list of links point to places that you are welcome to kind of visit on your own time and read a bit more. I'm going to kind of go very quickly through some of the key points like with you, but then you can come back to this before, after. So the first link kind of shows how you use the package. It's extremely simple. Basically, you copy the code for which you want to create a reproducible example. So you highlight, copy, and then you just run on your console the reprex function. That's all you need to do, and reprex will do two things. One is will create a very nicely rendered HTML preview. So you will see, if you are using RStudio in your viewer panel, you will see something like this that includes the code, also the output with a little comment. And then the second thing that we'll do is an invisible thing. It will put on your clipboard the same thing, but with markers for syntax, so that you can kind of copy this code, and then you can go to, for example, a new issue, and then you can paste that code into the body of a new issue, something like this, so that GitHub will render it this way. And the reason why this is particularly nice is because, as someone who wants to get help from someone else, then that someone else can look at the code, look at the output, even without running, and have a vague idea of what's going on. And if they need to run it, they can just simply copy this code and go to another console and paste it, because the comments allow you to run this code. So this is executable, right? So if I press enter now, what I get is the output that was contributed by the contributor, and then my output. So I can compare, one right next to each other. So that's the usage of the use this package. As you can see, it's very simple. Of course, you would include any packages that you need to kind of to demonstrate. You would also add any data that you need to demonstrate. But I'm going to cover the data problem specifically. Before I get to that, I would like to kind of discuss this vignette from the reprex package that discusses the do's and don'ts of reproducible examples. So very quickly about the data, what they have to say is that it is best to use the smallest, simplest, and most built-in data possible. And that is because we assume that what we want to have a conversation about is about the code. Sometimes it is about the data, and in that case, maybe you do have to use some kind of proprietary data. But if you can get away without that, if you can get away with a very boring, simple, and common data set like iris or empty cars, then go for it. Because that way, all the cognitive load for the person who is trying to help you will not go in trying to figure out the data, will go to trying to understand what is the problem with the code. So you might want to use, functions like head or sample to just get tiny bits of data that you want to share. And then there is a few other strategies that I'm going to cover later on this presentation. Also, it's best to just focus on the key messages that you want to convey with your code. So just include only what is strictly necessary. Sometimes the problems that you experience might be due to, for example, something like differences in package versions between you and someone else. And in that case, it might be useful to use the argument to reprex called session info. If you set that to true, it will kind of produce a little nice drop-down menu thing that you can expand to see what's the details of the session information of the person who ran that code, who created that reproducible example. Then white space and styling is important because it allows the reader to understand better what you're trying to do. So you might want to use the argument style equals true to reprex. And then in general, just be nice. So if, if I invite you to, a party, to a dinner in my house, it would be considered rude that, you get in my kitchen and you throw away food, or that, you change the furniture from, get in my bedroom and move the furniture. That's considered rude, right? So same thing happens with the reprex. So you are asking for help. You give people something so that they can help you. So you couldn't change the helper's environment. You couldn't remove, for example, things from the global environment of your helper. You wouldn't change the working directory of your helper, also because that won't work. So if you set the working directory to something that you only have in your computer, that won't be useful. Also, don't overwrite functions that are very common, like min or c for concatenate. If you need to do your own version of a very common function, then use min2, c2, or something like that, so you don't overwrite an existing one. And then a couple of more points. So if you have to change some global options, then restore them back at the end. If you have to write files, then delete them at the end. And don't delete stuff that you haven't created yourself. So yeah, just that. So to do that, sometimes you will need to play with temporary files and temporary directories, and R has very good features for that. So you might want to see the help file for temp file or temp dir to kind of learn how to do that. So you can write stuff, but not to the users, not to the helper's environment, or not to the helper's file system. Just write whatever you want to write to a temporary file, and then remove it at the end when you're done. So true is, we all acknowledge this is a lot of work, but the work that you put into developing a good reproducible example will kind of come back to you as benefits in two ways. One, because a lot of the time you won't even need to submit your reproducible example. In the process of building that reproducible example, you will likely learn a lot about your problem, and very often you solve your problem before you share it with others. And then the few times when you actually, you still haven't figured things out, then you will be in a much better position to get help quickly by providing a reproducible example that, at a glance can kind of communicate the problem that you're trying to solve. So finally, let's talk about how to create data sets on the fly that you could use with reprex. So here is a spreadsheet. You can select some a little bit of data from a spreadsheet, and you can use the add-in from the data pasta package to create a table, so a text version of stuff that you copied from outside the world. So something that you copied from Excel, you can use the data pasta package with a very convenient add-in. Let's see it again. So here, we are copying some rows and columns from Excel, then going to add-ins, paste as Tribble. That is an add-in that becomes available when you install the data pasta package. And this text now travels with your reproducible example. So now it's executable. Before it wasn't, before your data lived in an Excel file. Now it is plain text included in the reproducible example, so you can share it. If you already have data in your environment, imagine that you have a data frame, for example, the wings data frame. Let's imagine you have that. Okay, you can attach the data pasta package. This is what the data looks like. And then you run data pasta, the function data pasta, and it will print the text associated to that data frame again. So again, that's how to move stuff from either outside the world or from inside your R session, how to move that from there to plain text that you can then include in your reproducible example. So that is all I wanted to cover about the reprex package. But then there are situations where you have to go beyond reprex, and you may need to resort to other strategies. And one that I use and I recommend is using R Markdown files. So let's see what that might look like. So why sometimes reprex doesn't work? Well, in cases where you need to read stuff from your computer, for the moment, let's forget about this here call. I'm going to mention this in the next slide. But imagine you need to read in this file, your file.csv. So if you want to do that with the reprex package, you will fail because reprex creates a temporary working directory, which is different from the working directory where you are kind of standing. So that will fail and throw an error. But with R Markdown, you can do that. You can, read in your file.csv as you would normally do. You store that output into say an object called data, and then you can start using it. So let me now explain why I'm wrapping my path here to my file with here. The reason is because the RMD files, so R Markdown files, have a kind of weird notion of working directory. So if you go to our studio, you will see this init button here. If you go to the init directory item, you will see that by default, R Markdown documents think that the working directory is the place where the document lives, so the document directory. And that is easy to kind of catch you, because most likely than not, if you are in a, say, RStudio project, or if you are standing on an R package, you would expect that the working directory will be the project itself and not the place where the R Markdown file lives. So that is why you use here. So the package here allows you to create paths. Whatever you add in here within the parentheses will extend the path to your working directory, and the working directory is what you normally expect. So that's about it. So how you create an R Markdown file? Well, I think most of you have already done this, but if you haven't, you can go to File in RStudio, then New File and R Markdown. I particularly use a lot a flavor of R Markdown. R Markdown comes in multiple flavors. So the flavor that I like the most is the GitHub document, and you can get it if you go to this menu, and then you click here on From Template, and then here on GitHub document. The kind of R Markdown document that you will get will be very easy to share nicely in GitHub, and I'll show you that in a moment. So the entire workflow to create a reproducible example with R Markdown would be as follows. So you first create the file as I showed you in the previous slide. Then you start kind of writing your file as you could normally do in any kind of code-based file. So for example, here I'm using the readr package. Then I'm using the readr package to read this file. I remember here to use the here package to avoid any problems with the working directory. So I'm storing the output here in the data object. Now I'm kind of showing what the data looks like. And then here I do whatever, right? So usually the juice, what you really want to demonstrate, comes after you have read in some data. So here is the relevant code for your reprex. So when you're done, you simply hit the knit button. So this button here, you click there, and that will produce an MD version of your RMD file. So you will now have a new file called yourfile.md. And then you simply commit as usual and push as usual. And then you share the link to the MD file on GitHub. So for example, I've been working for this presentation on, so this presentation lives on an R Markdown file. So when I render that, I have created, or Neither has created for me an MD version, and here is the link to that file. So let me click here to see what it looks like. So as you can see, well, you can see nothing yet, but soon. There you go. So this is the file. This is what it looks like. It looks pretty neat. It has links and all that kind of stuff. The code renders, so you can see the code and the output. But of course, behind the hood, this is an MD file that was produced by Neither, and it looks kind of like source code, right? But GitHub is clever enough to render that MD file in a very nice way. Yeah, very, very reader friendly. So that's why I like GitHub Documents very much, because I have to do nothing special to get this beautiful HTML-like render version. So yeah, with that, I end everything I have for today. Yeah. So if there is any question, please go ahead.
Hi Mauro, this is Pranav. Actually, our internet connection was down for like 5 or 6 minutes, so here I have to go through your documentation again. But thank you for this session also.
You're very welcome. Very welcome. Maybe sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Klaus. You mentioned the sample function that is creating sample data out. Like, so if I add a data, like if I basically say use this data frame and create a sample, what is it doing? Is it, can I also define that it anonymizes things, or is it just like creating like randomly lines?
Yeah, the function sample as is creates just samples randomly a number of like a vector. But if you use the function from dplyr sample n, you can say how many things you want to sample 5, for example. So let's take the empty cars, which is like a long data frame. But if I attach dplyr, I can use the sample n function and the number of things, the number of rows that I want to sample, and immediately I get a random sample of 5 rows. That will be probably the one that you would be using most of the time.
Okay, yeah.
And the one thing that I forgot to tell you is how I use the reprex package. Reprex also comes with add-ins, so you can select code, and instead of running the function reprex on the console, you can come to add-ins and hit here on reprex selection, and that will render the reprex for you, as you can see now. Or if you are very lazy like me, so I go here to tools, modify keyword shortcuts, type here reprex, and you allocate or you link a keyword shortcut to the add-in. So now I can, let me refresh everything here. So I can select any code and press, in my case, I set it to be Control, R, and P, which I'm pressing right now. Sorry, select, Control RP, and that triggers the adding render selection. So that's a very quick way of creating reproducible examples. Okay, do we have any other question?
No.
Okay, thank you very much. This was a very a topic that I was very much interested in sharing, because it's kind of the opens the door to kind of very friendly communications about code. You know, asking for help sometimes can be intimidating, and a very good way to kind of start that conversation with your potential helper in a very good way is by providing them with a very easy to digest reproducible example. So as I was, for example, developing this presentation, I submitted a pull request to use this, to the reprex package, because I thought there was an issue there. And, you know, it was just a couple of emails and all solved, all nice. But certainly, you know, if you don't make the effort as someone who's trying to get help, if you don't make the effort to make the life of your helper easier, you will probably get help, but it will take way longer. So the easier you make their lives, the faster the turnover will be. So with that, I thank you very much, and I look forward to the next Data Science Incubator.
Thank you, Mauro. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.